guess I can't really see whether things are switched to me, but I suppose they are. Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I remember the hostility more than the grunts, but I guess things have worked out. I found out about this award 3 months ago in a call from Professor Van Noord. My first thought was that I'm really wholly unworthy of this kind of recognition. And my second thought was brought about by the word lifetime. I thought, yeah. You want me to move my mouse? Yeah, look at it. Look at it go. It's over there. Yeah, don't move that. Watch. Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's all good. I thought, holy smokes. Am I so old that my life is now a subject of conversation? Now, I suspect that these two thoughts have occurred to virtually every honoree receiving this award. But the third thought was probably unique to me, which is, what the heck can I talk about? I found out after I decided, sure, I'll accept this award, that I would have to make an oration on some topic or other for an hour. Now, which, by the way, is more than I typically talk in a month. So it's quite a challenge. And I wondered, what in the world am I going to say? I left IBM Research 20 years ago, and I really haven't not paid any attention to the world of linguistics or to IBM since then. And I can't really talk about what I do now. So what am I going to do? You guys probably know more about speech recognition and computational linguistics than I remember, probably more than I ever knew. So what could I do? Well, fortunately, Peter Brown and I were invited to a talk at a machine translation workshop last October. And we faced that problem then, and we decided we'll just reminisce about our good old times at IBM. So I'm going to do a little bit of that today. And I also took the opportunity of reading all the publicly available transcripts of what has been said by previous honorees. And I realized that there's a certain amount of biographical information that's appropriate to give in this sort of circumstance. Now, I don't usually talk about myself, so it's not a comfortable thing, but I'll see what I can do about revealing some facts. So, first of all, let me point out that I'm not now and have never been a linguist, a fact that is probably blindingly obvious to any of you who knew me during my time at IBM. I'm also not a historian. I'm not a diarist. And I would say I'm really not even a scientist. What I am is simply a computer programmer. My real connection to the ACL, therefore, is through the computational part of its name, not through the linguistics part. I began writing computer programs professionally almost 50 years ago now, and throughout that half-century, I've taken great pleasure in writing programs that do remarkable things. At IBM, I did this as part of a team of fantastic colleagues who are at least as deserving of this award as I am. Among those, I count especially, and in alphabetical order, Lalit Ball, Raimo Bacchus, Peter Brown, Paul Cohen, Stephen and Vincent Della Pietra, and Peter D'Souza. But let me dive now into the tale of my personal involvement with computers and with programming. The ENIAC was the first general-purpose electronic digital computer. Its name is an acronym for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. Here's what it looked like. It was invented by J. Presper Eckert and John Mauchly, and it weighed about 30 tons. It had 200 decimal digits of storage. There that were organized into 20 signed 10-digit numbers and could do 358 multiplications a second. As you can probably figure out from this description, each digit weighed about 300 pounds. It was originally intended for computing artillery tables, but was soon drafted by John von Neumann to do H-bomb calculations. It was built by the University of Pennsylvania and accepted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps, in July of 1946. Now that date's important to me because that's the month that I turned 0. Now, I've always been fascinated by computers, but I didn't really learn anything about them until 10 years later when my dad explained to me how the IBM 650 worked. It had a memory with 2,000 signed 10-digit integers stored on a cylindrical drum that spun around its axis about 200 times a second. When interpreted as an instruction, these integers had an opcode, an address of where to get the operation, and a second address of where to find the next instruction. Each of the addresses was 4 digits long, which is obviously necessary if you want to be able to address any one of 2,000 places on the drum, and this left 2 digits for the opcode. Now, if your current instruction finished a little too soon, you might have to wait a few microseconds so that the appropriate integer would roll under the read head, and you could find out what you were supposed to do next. But if your instruction took a little bit too long so that the address of the next instruction had just passed the read head by the time you were ready for it, you'd have to wait another 5 milliseconds for the drum to roll all the way around before you could figure out what to do next. Now, I didn't have a manual for the 650, and I really had no idea what it meant to write a computer program or even what instructions were. But I spent all my time thinking about the problem of coordinating everything so that the next instruction was available just when you needed it, and you wouldn't have to wait for the drum to go around again. When I was older, my dad brought home an ALGOL manual from a Burroughs B5000. I wrote a lot of programs in ALGOL, and I kept them in a big notebook that I carried around with me all over the place. It's very unlikely any of them actually worked because I never had a computer to run them on. And I've realized that you really do need a computer if you want to get things right. I didn't get to use a real computer until after high school. During the summer after my senior year, I spent 3 weeks representing New Mexico at the National Youth Science Camp in the mountains of West Virginia, learning to program in Fortran and working on a 1620 that IBM had been kind enough to donate to the camp. That machine had 40,000 decimal digits of memory and could do 50 10-digit multiplications a second. It consisted of several large cabinets that occupied, I would guess, maybe 30 or 40 cubic feet. Computers were not of much interest to most of my fellow campers, so I got to use the 1620 all by myself most of the time. A number of people visited the camp to brief us on the latest developments in various areas of science and technology, and one of those visitors was Neil Armstrong, who 5 years before setting foot on the moon came to the hills of West Virginia to discuss computing in the space program. He brought with him a piece of equipment the size of a box of matches. And he told us that this was equivalent to our 1620. That was a completely impossible thing for me to believe at the time. Now, today, the computational power of the camp's 1620 could be lost in the dirt under your fingernails. But back then, I really just couldn't see how that would even be possible. When the camp ended, I enrolled at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque to study math, chemistry, and physics. In those days, there were no computer science courses at UNM, but I got a job at nearby Kirtland Air Force Weapons Lab writing Fortran programs for a CDC 6600. Now, the 6600 was truly a supercomputer in its day. It had 256,000 60-bit words of storage and could do more than 1 million 60-bit multiplies in a second. The jump from the 1620 to the 6600 was another really astonishing thing for me. One of the items of interest at the weapons lab was the explosion of fusion bombs. and particularly the electromagnetic fields generated by those explosions. When I arrived, the lab had in its possession a program for computing these fields, but for whatever reason, they were not in possession of the programmer who'd created it. It took hundreds of hours of CPU time to make a single run of this program, and my boss at the lab gave me the job of figuring out how it worked and making it run faster. The style of the original program was very unpleasant, so the first thing I did was rewrite the whole thing. And after a while, I had a new program that produced the same answers as the old one, but about 100 times faster. And then a strange thing happened. Instead of running the old computations in 1/100th of the time, the powers that be at the lab ran computations that were 100 times bigger. I took this as an indication that one of the most important goals of government-financed research is not so much to get answers as it is to consume the computer budget, which has left me ever since with a jaundiced view of government-financed research. Now, while I was at the weapons lab, I heard stories that a guy named Dan Slotnick was building a computer called the Iliac 4 at the University of Illinois. It was said that when the Iliac 4 was turned on, it would double the world's computing power. I learned a lot of fascinating things at the weapons lab, but perhaps the most important thing that I learned was that I really loved everything about computers. I loved the solitude of the computer lab late at night. I loved the air-conditioned smell of the place. I loved the sound of the disks whirring and the printers clacking. I loved thumbing through listings. That's ridiculous, but I did. I even loved Hollerith cards. So when I left UNM and the weapons lab, I forsook the graduate study of mathematical logic that I'd been planning and headed off to the U of I to study computer science and to help with the Iliac 4. In case some of you have never seen a Hollerith card, here's a picture of Herman Hollerith. He invented a punched card like this one that was used in tabulating the 1890 census. In 1910, the tabulating machine company that he founded merged with 3 other firms to form the Computing Tabulating Recording Company, which had its name changed to IBM by Thomas J. Watson in 1924. Over the years, Hollerith's card was transformed into this. After I finished my PhD, I applied for a few jobs, and even though I had a very dim opinion of IBM computers, having seen the vast difference between the 1620 and the 6600, one of those jobs I applied for was with IBM Research. But I was very impressed when I visited the Watson Research Center, both by the place and by the people working there. They offered me a job working on a compiler to produce provably correct code. I accepted their offer in the spring of 1972, but by the time I showed up for